Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first webinar of this holiday season. I am Savannah Suttle, founder and owner of Schema. I work with family-owned and operated businesses when family dynamics are impacting business operations. And today I am so excited to have Jen Kilgo with me. Jen is also a therapist turned business coach, and she works in the world of family offices and entrepreneurs and all the things. And we all know how that end of year time goes. It is less than 2 weeks to Thanksgiving. It is 6 weeks till Christmas, 7 till the end of the year. And so as holiday stress and tension starts to flare, just really excited to lead this webinar, which is on de-escalating family conflict over the holidays. Today, we're going to cover how to deal with how to de-escalate conflict when it does happen, but also how to be proactive about setting yourself up for success with intentionality before you get into the holiday season with your family. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it off to Jen and allow you to speak about some of the ways that you've been able to intentionally build your holiday routines.
Hello. Awesome. I'm so glad to be here with you, Savannah. It's always such a good time, and welcome to all of our guests. I don't know if people can see me or if it matters. I wonder, do you want to stop screen sharing, Savannah? I think that
Yes,
might.
I forgot that.
No,
Yeah.
you're all good. That way, I think there we go. Perfect, perfect. Okay, awesome. So welcome. Yes. So my background, having worked with families and individuals, first in private practice as a therapist, and now doing more coaching for families, family offices, financial professionals, entrepreneurs, and so on. One of the things that I have seen over the last 2 decades that Savannah and I thought would be a really great thing to kick off with is just opening this time together by discussing the power of intentionality,
Mm.
specifically when it comes to the holidays, because what most of us do and what most of I've observed my clients doing over the last couple decades is, we book the tickets, we head home or whatever the setup is to be amongst whatever our family looks like. And then, we have a running joke in the psychology world that it doesn't matter how much personal growth work you've done, pretty much everybody regresses to about 11 years old within a few days of being together in family. And that happens because this is our family of origin or where we came from. And so it's going to kick up a lot of stuff for us. But most people head into it blind. We just kind of tolerate it every year. And part of the conversation that Savannah and I wanted to have today is to equip you all with some tools and some ideas and some ways to head into whatever the holidays look like for you with your people. Um, Really curating the experience that you want to have, like designing it and coming into it with intentionality. Now, we can't control other people, obviously, but we can control ourselves. And so we're going to talk a lot today about some tools and some ways to empower you all with boundaries, with de-escalation tactics, and with things that are going to help you move through what we're imagining are some pretty common experiences that you're having. Sound like a good time?
Woo! Awesome. 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 So let's just kind of start off by what exactly are some common themes that you've seen in terms of your clientele? Like big issues when I look back are, okay, I've got family members who don't know how to respect boundaries, or man, I really don't want to have this conversation with my folks again, or man, we really need to have conversations with my folks and they don't want to talk about it, or man, I'm really looking forward to connecting with my parents. I hope that they are emotionally available this time, and really trying to set expectations with folks. Or it's an election year. I'm sure people are also like, oh my gosh, can we please not talk about politics?
Hot
So
year
yeah.
content. 100%. Yep. I think all of those things that you named, and I think one of the things I would start with out of the gate that you touched on that I think is a really powerful place for us to begin is getting really clear on our expectations. So the way that I would often work with my clients around this is we would identify who are you going to be with, and in that group of people, whether that's extended family, in-laws, that sort of thing, getting really clear on where the sticky pain points are and then making a plan to avoid those or get really clear on what people can handle and do, right?
Mm,
So the way that this can kind of break down is I would often have clients who would say like, every fucking year my dad with this thing, and it just sets me off, and then we'd spend a lot of time in session kind of putting that person back together again on the other side. That's human. However, like we can avoid that when we look at who are the people that are going to be there and what is their capability, right?
right.
So if you have like Uncle Tommy over here who isn't maybe is really lovable in lots of ways but isn't super conscious around things, like that's not somebody to try and have a deep conversation with, right? But what
That's
happens
the
for a
part.
lot of us, especially with our parents, is that the younger parts of us are still craving certain things like validation, or maybe if I have this conversation, they'll really hear me this time. And sometimes,
Recognition
yeah,
or solving an old, sibling feud.
yep,
Finally.
yep, yep. Maybe this year I won't get into it with my brother or like whatever the thing is. And what I encourage people to consider out of the gate is like, what is the data here? And what I mean by that is people are constantly showing us who they are. And this is
Mm,
not coming from a place of judgment. But where we have a lot of conflict in families is where we have expectations of a family member that they literally cannot meet or do. And we keep hoping that maybe it will be different. And often this is subconscious. So we find ourselves getting triggered or angry or upset or whatnot every year around the same disappointment, the same hurt, the same whatnot. When we can take some time intentionally before we're around family to rein that in and really ask ourselves, like, what do I know to be true about the
mm,
people that I'm going to be around? Based
mhm.
on just simple evidence of the past. Like, has this person ever been really supportive of my political views? Right? Or has this person ever like really asked me great questions about my life? Right? And it's okay if they haven't, but then that might be a person to consider, like, well, then what are safe topics? It might be football, might be the
100%.
weather.
Like I think so often there's this expectation of, oh, if only my family this year could give me the gift of them having emotional intelligence for the first time. And I'm like, honey, like your parents are in their 70s. That ship has sailed. Like the
Yeah.
neuroplasticity that would be required for them to, now I'm not saying not like learn new skills or be more empathetic or, you know, repair some estrangement or reconciliation. I'm not talking about like, yeah, they can do that. But if you're all of a sudden expecting a school bus to turn into a Corvette, like you just got another thing coming. It's just not going to happen. And so there's so much time where we're like really wrestling with helping people set clear and loving expectations and set those bars kind of low. Like what's that baseline? To your point, what's that baseline of, hey, who are you? How do you normally show up? How can I expect you to show up? And now, how do I actually need to protect my space and energy given how you are? Right.
Mm,
If I know that you are so ADHD and you need hyperstimulation all the time, but I need peace and quiet or introvert time, then
yeah.
trying to manage your noise levels is probably not going to be effective. What I need to do is go find a quiet place to retreat and let everybody know that if the do not disturb sign is on the door, that means it's locked, don't come in, you know.
Yep. Yep. 100%. And I think what you're touching on there is what we call a pattern interrupt, right?
Mm,
So what happens for a lot of us, we go home or wherever we go in the same system, and the patterns, it's like cogs in a wheel. Man, one starts, the others fall in line. It's all a system. And what we want to help y'all do today is sort of throw a 2x4 in there in terms of like the things that stress you out that you just like really don't want to have happen again. So I think step one is identifying like where do those tricky, sticky places come up, and who are the who are the prime offenders in your world, if you will. And then really looking at like, do I have realistic expectations of this person based on the data of whom they've shown me to be over the years? And if I don't, like, that's okay. That's human, especially with parents. But can I really reset those and then try to change the way that I engage so that that whole system doesn't start firing and we all end up in the same boat by day 3 at each other's throats, or running to the bar down the street or whatever people do, right?
100%.
Mhm.
100%. Yeah, and like even just being able to sit and what I encourage everybody to do is, okay, if you want to minimize conflict, right? Or if you want to minimize explosions or awkward situations or whatever, okay, let's actually, what is the flip side? Instead of focusing on the negative or what you don't want to happen, what is it that you would like to see happen? Right. So
Mhm.
planning ahead with the intentionality. What is your vision for how this could go well instead of just how it could go wrong?
Yep.
Being able to map out, say, okay, you know what, this year I really want to connect with my stepmom in this particular way. I know that she and I maybe don't get along politically or we'd have different value sets, but I know that she really loves shopping, and she really loves getting gifts for people. That's her big love language. This is her big time of year. How am I going to connect with her in that way? I'd like to plan specific times to go shopping with her where we can both be in Banana Republic on the same, with different sides of the store, and it's connection, but it's not, she may not be the kind of person who wants to emotionally connect with you at that deeper level, right? Some people are not. That's the other thing. It's like I think sometimes we have this expectation of going home to the holidays, and trying to connect with folks the way that we connect instead of
Yep.
understanding how they connect
Yep.
and meeting
Definitely.
them there. So
Mhm.
by being able to kind of take the gift, the giving season, and give people the gift of attuning the way that they need is really wonderful, because if you can do that for them, wouldn't it be awesome if they could also do that for you? Because that's what you're really craving too, but you got to give it too. It's too much.
100%. 100%. And I love that you're talking about that, Savannah, because it's such an empowering place to be. This is back to that sort of taking control of like curating how we're going to show up. And if we know that a certain family member or person that's going to be there really can connect around, again, fill in the thing, sports ball, as I call it, or
Mhm.
like whatever it is, then that's a nice place to go. And I would also encourage y'all, as you're listening on this call, like we're going to leave time in the second half for support and coaching around your particular situation. So as we're presenting this, if things come up for you that you're like, oh, that would be really helpful to get some answers, just make a mental note or jot that down, and we're going to make space for that so we can be more specific. Um, but I don't know. I think that kind of takes us maybe into touching a little bit on like boundaries and self-care, because you started to talk about that, Savannah. Like, how do you, as an introvert, right, or whatnot, care for your own energy?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, I'm an ambivert and usually most of the time extrovert. So I can't really speak to the introvert side, but no, but
I'm
yeah,
thinking of all the introverts out there who are already cringing at
all
the
the
idea of
introverts.
a
Yes,
14
yes.
person dinner.
Yeah, yes, yes, exactly. So I tend to be a hyper planner. I like to do a lot of my mental legwork ahead of time because it helps me be clear, particularly when you get into situations where boundaries are nebulous or they're hard to enforce, right? First, let me start off by saying there's a difference between a boundary and a request. A boundary is saying, hey, could you please not be so loud? I'm feeling overstimulated. That's a request. A boundary is saying, I'm feeling overstimulated. I'm going to go sit in the car and put my headphones on and be away from folks, right? That's creating the actual distance and space that you will need. So especially if you're going home or going to somebody of another family member's house, sometimes it's really difficult to be able to enforce those boundaries. So we feel as though we are just incumbent upon our managing our family members to get them to respect our requests. Then we start feeling really upset if they don't respect our requests because we see it as a direct um, negation of our needs, right? Of them saying, oh, you're not important enough to respect, or you're not worth my time, or I don't really care that much, or da da da, as opposed to it just being like, no, they've always been loud, they've always been this way, this isn't really anything new, and you don't have proper boundaries right now in order to enforce whatever you need. So what I like for people to do ahead of time is kind of start to map out several different things. One, what exactly are you going to need in order to be a safe, sane, humane, gentle, loving, fun individual, or however you want to show up? Like, do you know that you're going to need to just like get a 2 hour nap in every day? Awesome. Make sure that you do that, right? Like, Put that on a list of like, this is something I know I'm going to need. Let's say you're training for a half marathon and you know you're going to need to get time in for your run and you know you're going to need to stick to a sleep schedule. And let's say you've started waking up early and your family's full of night owls, right? So by being able to be clear with yourself about what you want and need, and then by being able to communicate those expectations ahead of time and say, hey, everybody, I'm just going to let you know during this trip, I'm going to really strive to be in bed by 10 p.m. I'm going to wake up at 5. I'm training for this thing. It's not that I don't want to spend time or hang out with you. It's just that these other goals are still in progress. And so I'm going to try to do my best to make it work. But where you're creating structure, you're creating clarity around expectations, but you're not making anybody else the bad guy. And you're not waiting until you get there, until the last minute where all of a sudden,
Yeah,
now
I
it's
think that's so key.
11, you're stressing, everybody else is having a really good time, and you're just now being the party pooper because you've got to go be up at 5 a.m. and because you just have to be, whatever, you're just the overachiever, and whatever those narratives that about control or about old stereotypes or you are just this way, and now it starts to bring up all of those old roles, right? Don't even, if you can help it, don't give them that opportunity. Set a clear expectation. Say, hey, I'm just sticking to what my goals were, and you know what, January's coming, so this was a goal that I set and I got to knock it out by the end of the year, right? What kind
Right.
of goals are you setting? Turn it around.
I want to jump in there because I love this point, and it makes me think of something I would see come up with my clients a lot around this time of year is we can struggle specifically with families of origin to give ourselves permission
Mm,
to be different in the
yes.
system. And I think it's so important what you're naming there because that is how we set that is how we can curate a different experience for ourselves. But if any of you listening are like, oh, I didn't even like it, I didn't even know I could do that, right? Even though objectively, you can, we often do this thing where it's like, well, we've always done it this way. We do
Hmm.
Christmas Eve candlelight service and then this and then that and the da da da. And we just sort of like show up and go with the flow. Coming back to intentionality, if you sit down and you think about what permission would you need to give yourself to do things differently, and is there any resistance to that in any places, and if so, why? Is it because you might get shamed or your dad might be upset that you're not doing the same thing you always do? Those are some of the things that can show up, but when we can really get clear on like what you're talking about, Savannah, like what we need, then I think one of the biggest steps is actually giving ourselves the permission to do things differently, which no matter how successful we are in our careers and other relationships, this is like the hardest place for a lot of people to do that
Yeah.
because there might be feelings in the family about that. But that's not a reason not to do it. It's just something to say, cool, what does loving myself in this scenario look like? Because last year I didn't do that. I abandoned myself. I did what they
Hmm.
wanted me to do. And I was a raging, screaming mess by like day 4,
Hmm.
which is what we're
Hmm.
trying to avoid, right?
Absolutely. And then also the piece of it of being like, okay, let's say that you've got 10 family members and it's just the thing that you go to the candlelight choral service every year, and you were like, man, I would really rather not. But you know that it really means so much to certain other members of your family. And even though for you going might be um less than ideal. Let's say you would want to intentionally spend that some other time or in a different way, right? Let's do something new this year. If you get to that crossroads where it becomes your way or everybody else's way, think about it in terms of internal compromise. If you're going to say yes to their carols by candlelight thing, and say, okay, I'm going to go here. And the reason I'm going to go is because I'm being intentional about loving my mother or my sister or whatever in this way. This is my way of showing them love as opposed to I'm just having the life sucked out of me. Right. But then turn it around, say, I'm going to go with you to this because I love you. And therefore, also, what I would love from you is now I'm going to need some alone time, right? Or
Yeah.
now I'm going to need to go finish my Christmas shopping because I didn't have time to do this. So, because we were at the candlelight thing. So, allow them to love you back in a way, but you have to state what you need. What is that compromise? Because a lot of times people know, like, oh, I don't want to go to that thing because I need to go get my shopping done. I got this. Express those stresses without accusation, just matter of factly. Just put it on the table, right? it's not yours to necessarily have to solve alone. And sometimes people feel in that it is their job to make sure everybody else is okay. If I can just manage everybody else,
Yeah.
then I can take care of myself. And what we want to do here is flip that paradigm, say, take care of you. If you take care of you, you take a lot of the steam out of that pressure cooker, right?
Exactly.
And so all of a sudden you de-escalate things, allow yourself to start meeting your own needs. That way nobody else is responsible for it, and therefore nobody else is going to let you down. Now, they might let you down by being an asshole, but you know, that's a different kind of disappointment. So we'll get to that in a minute.
Exactly. I love that. I love that. And with these I love that you brought up that internal piece because it's about the intentionality of the boundaries, right? And I always tell my clients like boundaries are fluid. They get to change over time. It's not like a boundary. People often think of a boundary as this like rigid thing I have to like throw down in a kind of aggressive way when really it's a lot more. Sometimes it's the very subtle place of how can I show you love while also loving me? And if I show you love in this way, then how do I show myself love in this way? The reason this is so freaking important in relationship is resentment. And I want to touch on
Mm,
that for a second because the second, this is one of the best things I can offer around relationships, or especially around the holidays. The second you're feeling resentment towards anyone, there is either a boundary you need that has not been expressed
mm,
or a request that you have not made. Like non-negotiable. Like the second you feel resentment, take that as your sign. Like I have to pause and consider where I have left myself or abandoned myself or muted myself or not requested what I need. And I think Savannah and I work in similar ways in that we both believe in like radical responsibility for our own emotional regulation and well-being. So often resentment creeps into these relationships and it's cancer. It's cancer to a relationship. So when we can look at things through the lens of like, what do I need to do, ask for, not do, express, give myself to protect against feeling resentful, which Savannah just gave a beautiful example of, it actually supports the overall health of the relationship. The reason so many relationships get really toxic is because there's so many years of resentment built up and there haven't been adequate repairs. That's another topic for another time. But just looking at it through this lens of this is like protecting my relationships when I take care of myself in this way. And what we find over time is that sometimes with certain members of our family, we might need to do a certain kind of boundary, but then there's the next year or later, it changes. And it's like, I don't really
mhm,
need that one anymore because they kind of got the memo and now things are easier in that way. So,
mhm, mhm, 100%, 100%. And I think, again, going back to that basic practice of map what you need. What do you need? Do you need to prioritize time with your dog? Do you need to make sure that the dog rules that your parents have for their dogs, which are different than yours, do you need to like set some clear communication about that? Like, hey, I don't let my dog eat from the table. Please don't permit that, or whatever it is.
mhm.
um and parenting with kids, same thing. Hey, my kids are so excited to come see you, Nani and Poppy, it's so great. And you know how last year we kept the kids up real late every time and they always had meltdowns? I would love to not repeat that this year, right? And so, but sometimes, especially, think about how to sequence this in households where people are not great at articulating boundaries, then they do not express them. Or
Correct.
when they express them, it comes out as anger, frustration, or reaction
Exactly.
and it's after the fact, right? So it makes it really hard to be like, hey, I'm going to be proactive. I want to be kind and collaborative with you as we start to, you know, be intentional about these next few days, right? That's the time when you need to actually figure out your boundaries, go talk to somebody, plan together, make it collaboration instead of conflict. Don't wait until the last minute. Don't wait until you're already there. And then all of a sudden you're frustrated and you're like, blah, 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 blah. And I mean, sometimes you can't help it. But if you can help it, do be good to future you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I used to have the experience all the time with clients in session where we would be planning for the holidays and how to take care of themselves. And, they would say things like, well, I just, after more than like 2 nights in the house, I just get so stressed. And then I'm like, well, what if you maybe after 2 nights stayed somewhere else? And oftentimes they would literally be like, that's allowed. You know what I mean? Like even though we're grown ass adults,
Yes.
like there's
Yes.
still this kid brain that kicks in that's like, but I have to stay with my parents. No, you actually don't, right? So there are these places where
And
we can
they've been without you for a long time.
a
They'll
long
probably
time,
love
right?
the space too.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like where are those spaces again back to the permission giving, right? We're really breaking outside of the model of the family system and thinking for yourself, how do I need to structure this? And it might look a little different, but this is going to make me more energized and I'll have more emotional sustainability to show up how I want to show up. So a way to make this really practical before you do whatever you're doing for the holidays is, over your coffee or your tea in the morning, like taking some time to write down some of your answers to some of the questions that Savannah and I are posing and just really feeling into how can I think outside of the box here? Because if we want to have a different experience, we have to do things in a different way.
Mhm.
And chances are your family's not going to do that. It's going to be you leading that for yourself, that self leadership of curating your own experience.
But Jen, you haven't met my family. My family has no boundaries, and it doesn't matter what I say. They're totally just going to do whatever the heck they want, and I'm expected to just go right along with it. And if I don't, then it's going to cause some drama, and I just don't even want to deal with that. So, what do you do?
Oh my gosh, best question ever. Yeah. Well, here's where it gets really real around the self responsibility part. What are you willing to tolerate? What are you
Mm,
available for? Right. And what I mean by that is there are times, I think for sure, where we really want to choose our battles, right? Like certain choices can create, even if they're healthy on our side, can create more chaos than we really want to freaking deal with, right? So it comes back to discernment, right? But in that scenario, first off, we literally cannot control anyone else's feelings. The reason that so many people don't take care of themselves at the holidays is because they're stuck in some sort of people pleasing, right?
mm,
Some sort of I'm elevating somebody else's desires above my own and that's what I'm expected to do or that's what I've done my whole life or I don't really know how not to. We're giving you a lot of examples of how not to, but I think there's a point at which we have to decide, or at least we don't have to. We're invited to decide what am I available for and what am I willing to tolerate. And if you're willing to tolerate, like all of those requests being, all of those awful feelings that come up for you, that's a personal choice, and that's totally okay. Like you are the director of your own ship. But what I would often see for people is they would come back from the holidays and they would be a puddle and a pancake, sick, often physically sick. I'll see this a lot because our
mhm.
immune systems get so worn down from the emotional intensity of it all.
Yes.
That's a choice, right? And so we can back it up and say, if that's the case, and I'm not going to be respected or my boundaries are going to be completely disregarded, then I get to decide what am I available for. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm not available for staying at the house. Maybe I book myself a nice hotel and I come over for dinner and presents, right?
Mhm.
But again, a lot of people go, but the horror, my mom would die, And it's like, actually, she won't die. She might be pissed and then she might throw some shame your way. But
Mhm.
maybe you don't have a 2 week recovery on the other side, right?
Mhm.
Or maybe there's these beautiful points where we can, like Savannah was explaining, give some and also give some back to ourselves. But we
Mhm.
don't have to just experience things that we hate. We don't actually have to do that. Like
Yes.
consider this your permission slip not to.
100%. 100%. And yeah, I think, the operationally, one of the things that I also see is people when they're aggregating, they're coming together for the holidays, they shift models of how they communicate. So, for example, you might be a single person living by yourself and you're used to a lot of quiet. Or you might be a couple who's been together for a long time. Or you might be a family who's got your own kids and you're used to things being loud and whatever. And you've got your systems and your processes and who's going to soccer practice and then ballet and piano and da 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 da. When you take all of those folks and now you have put them in a room and let's say you have 10 to 12 people, it's a different operating dynamic, even just from how you organize around the kitchen, right? Of who's getting plates, how are you sequencing events, who's doing what, who's responsible, how are we yelling at each other across the house, or are we just like going and getting people, all of this stuff. And so that level of shifting into a different type of team dynamic, again, without structure, clarity, expectations, right? When you've added all of these other folks, kids and in-laws and friends of the family, it can get really hectic. And so if you are overstimulated, or if you are at a point where you're like, hey, I just I just need to go back to my little clan, right? That's fine. Figure out a different room in the household that you're not necessarily cut off, but you can go sequester yourself in your little brood or whatever and kind of take a chill pill. But if, or another way is to make sure that as you have, okay, the game plan, everybody's going to come together for dinner, and then the next day we're going to open presents, and then the next day we're going to do lunch, and then the next day we're going to, I don't know, the Christmas tree farm, and then we're doing da 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 da, you know, to be able to have those agendas and have the expectations, and brace yourself ahead of time and be like, all right, I know that we're about to go see racist Aunt Sally, and I know that I do not want to be alone in a room with her, like, okay, so great. What's your strategy and your game plan ahead of time? You don't have to think about that for 6 weeks in advance either, just so you know. I know it's sometimes really difficult, and it's hard to, because to stop the rumination of like, oh gosh, what about this? Or how do I do this? Or da, 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 da. If you can channel that anxiety into creating a clear list of what you will need, what your personal boundaries will be, and then operationally, what kind of structure do you need to implement? So if you're hosting, for example, and you know that you're going to use the fine china and it's not dishwasher safe, and you're going to use it the entire time, you're going to have somebody on dishwashing duty. So go ahead and assign a chore chart. Go ahead and say, hey, Paul, you're on dishwashing duty on Mondays, Jan, you're on Tuesdays, whatever. Go ahead and let people know what's expected of them and how they can help out with actually making things run more effectively and more smoothly. It's a way for them to show connection and love and care in a way that's not just talking, right? It's actually showing it. And especially for our lovely guys out there, activity-based love things are great, right? So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So y'all are probably picking up some of the themes by now, right? But we're talking a lot about discernment. We're talking a lot about intentionality. We're talking a lot about, if you imagine your time with your family, the way that we would envision a work project or something that we're training for, we take the time ahead of time to plan and to think about
yes.
it, but with coming from a place of like heart-led leadership, because honestly, the fact that you're on this call, like the therapist in me is like, y'all are people who care about modeling healthy behavior in your families. And so know that, like, while some of these things can feel, I don't know, a little nervous or scary, you're modeling a lot. And
Yes.
sometimes when we do these things, you've got allies or people that come out of the woodworks. For me, it was often my cousins. I love my cousins. They're so fun, but they would be like, I saw you just like not stay at the house that year. And I was like, holy shit, I hadn't even thought about it that way. Right. Like, I'm going to do that next year. Or you start to kind of shift the dynamics, and you can be actually quite inspiring for people,
Mhm.
because when we take responsibility for ourselves, we are actually leading by example. And you don't even have to say anything about it. It's just our behaviors are demonstrating a different way of doing things, which I always like to encourage folks is so, so loving when
Yes.
we're helping the same pattern not repeat that ends up harming everyone or creating more resentment, right?
Mhm. Yeah. And, one thing is just remembering who you are now is not who you were, 5 to 10 years ago, or 25 years ago, or 45 years ago, and so you have grown as a person. You have literally curated your life in a different way. Now you're coming back to a familiar environment, but you don't have to revert to that old paradigm. And you will if you keep everything the same. But part of the joy of becoming an adult or getting older is showing everybody, hey, look at these other cool ways in which I've grown. And
Mm.
the existing framework may not be big enough to support showing everybody these new dimensions of you. And that's fine. You know, that's fine.
Mhm.
Build some new ones.
Exactly. I love that. Yeah. I love how you said that, Savannah. That's a great way to name that. Hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about actual conflict. So, we've all had that family member who just will not stop beating a dead horse, and they are going to tell you about their, religious views or their political views or their whatever, and they're going to really try to convert you. And or the family member who just really wants to pick a fight, right? And that's how they just want to get under your skin. They just want to drive you crazy. They want to settle an old score, whatever it is, and how to actually deal with those folks.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
Jen, you want to start with the
Yeah, for sure. So the image I got as you were naming that, the first I think in pictures a lot, and I got the image of have y'all seen The Matrix, right? Where like the bullets, the bullets are coming at Neo, and he's like slow motion, like, and then the whoosh, like the bullet goes back. That's what I think of. So in those situations, what's often happening energetically, and I think through things in terms of energy, energetically, that person, usually subconsciously, sometimes consciously, they're trying to hook you in a way that you've been available for hooking before, to put it
Mhm.
bluntly, right? So, so coming back to the like, do I want to be available for being hooked into this political conversation, right? And I mean, maybe, right? But maybe not. And then if it's a maybe not, I don't want to end up down that spiral anymore or in that same place that I know this dynamic is going to go, then we have to change our behavior. So, some practical ways to do this. First off, everybody has to go to the bathroom, and it's not something you can argue against. You can't say like, no, you can't go to the bathroom, but like this is one of my favorite like quick ways to just be like, you know what, I'm gonna run to the bathroom, and then maybe you go to the bathroom or not, but like you get yourself out of the situation without causing a big stir. That is a quick way to be able to get a moment to yourself, to sort of ground, to sort of come into yourself, to ask yourself the question, am I going back in there, or do I suddenly need to run an errand? Or like, it is okay to come up with little white lies, if you will, to protect your peace.
Mhm.
There are also ways to break another pattern interrupt, to break that dynamic. People love to talk about themselves. They just do, right? So if a conversation is heading in that direction, you can often re-steer it in a different direction by asking that person a question about something that you know that they would love to talk about, ideally not the thing that gets all heated, right? So not like, oh, tell me all your thoughts and beliefs on this thing that you know I disagree with, right? But something that breaks the pattern, right? So other examples of that could be other hobbies that you know that they have, or things of that nature, and it can really shift the energy. Another way to really break people's brains in the best way, and this is a, I would call this an advanced skill in the moment, but why not, let's talk about it, is um if someone's being a real dick, like, and you out of nowhere just sort of compliment something about them, like out of left field, it can be like, hey, you know what? I heard so and so talking the other day about what you were doing with this part of your career or your farm or your 1972 Corvette or whatever, right? That is really cool. Can you tell me more about that? Then it like scrambles the dynamic, and they'll probably start talking about the thing that they're proud of. It is challenging because when someone's being like icky energy, it can be hard to throw in love. But a truly loving compliment or something, telling somebody something that we appreciate about them, it is like magic for diffusing the human ego and human pride, which really in that situation is just trying to amp up. So what most of us do is like ego rises, our ego rises, and then pride, and then yeah, we're like at each other's throats. But like at any point in there, if you actually drop into your heart, right?
Yes.
And realize like, okay, this person's feeling fear, or they're feeling anger, or they're feeling whatever is making them do this. I don't actually have to be available for that.
Yeah.
I can completely steer the ship in a different direction.
100%. I
Mhm.
love that. Absolutely. There, one of the things that comes to mind too is that when people start pontificating and, they just launch into this diatribe about whatever the state of the world, and you're just like, oh my gosh, like I do not want to hear this again. If you can dig a little deeper, right? There are kind of two things. One is if you cannot leave and or if you can. if you cannot leave, right, for whatever reason, let's say it's at the dinner table and you just, you know that if you get up, it's going to cause a stir and you don't want to do that.
Or
If
you're
you
in the
just
car
have,
and you like literally can't jump out.
yes,
Right?
let's, so let's assume that you cannot leave. If you can flip the script in your head of instead of hearing the content that they're telling you and say, huh, I wonder what kind of emotional experience they're having right now.
Such a good question. Yep.
Like, wow, they seem really upset. They seem really angry, or they seem really scared, or they're concerned. And now they're projecting that stuff onto me. They're scared that I don't see what's coming, or they're scared that I might be unprepared. How are they trying to show care and concern to me? And you may be like, you know what? Listen, Savannah, I live with a bunch of narcissists and I just have to gray rock them all the time, and that might be true too. But in that case, also be like, wow, this person really needs attention right now. They must be feeling really insecure or really lonely. I wonder how I can connect with them in a way that will make them feel seen, heard, understood, safe. Right. And is there any way that I can attune to that and that I can care about their emotional experience because it's really not about all of this other stuff.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
if you can get away, by all means, you know, register that. Hey, it seems like there's more stuff under here than just the politics, and I hear you being scared and anxious about the state of the world and the things that are not controllable. And I'm just going to have to let you manage that anxiety on your own. I don't really have space for it right now. I'm kind of just up to my eyeballs but I love you and I want to give you a hug.
Beautiful.
And leave. It
Yeah.
will be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think we often feel like just because we're in a situation, we have to stay in it. Right. And it's not true. It's not true. We really don't. It's back to that question of like, what am I available for? What can I offer? And then where do I need to just really protect my peace so that I'm not, especially I would add to, especially with all the drinking and stuff that goes on the holidays. If people
Oh,
have
yeah.
had a lot to drink, don't even try any like, deeper conversation. Like just don't even, because it's just not going to go well. Like after half a drink, the judgment center in our brain is altered, right? And so just seeing how those things escalate in families with substances, it's just a nice thing to be aware of. Like
Yeah.
now's a great time to go sit on the porch or whatnot. And then maybe those conversations happen over coffee in the morning, or things of that nature. But just being
Mhm.
mindful of people's states of sobriety is important too.
100%. Yeah,
Mhm.
and that also kind of goes back to that neuroplasticity thing, right? Like just limits. People have
Mhm.
limits. And so if you start noticing that, I don't know, your sibling is just really getting into the booze again, and you're like, "God, this is not going to be a good thing," you don't have to stay
Yeah.
and watch it play out. You can leave. It's going to be fine.
Mhm.
Let's say that you have, oh gosh, my nose is itching. Sorry. Um, oh, lost my train of thought. Anyway.
I'll come back. I am also just a little mindful of our time, and I want to make sure that we're leaving room for folks to get some support if there are. Savannah, you okay if I open this up for questions now?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Yeah. So those of you on the call, this is obviously a really safe environment here. Any of you that have questions or are looking for guidance on a particular situation that you're stressed about, this is your moment. So I just want to open up the floor and see. Oh, we got Hans. Perfect. Go for it, Hans.
Yeah. So my question is about going home to see family. Um, do you think that just making the arrangements to stay someplace else right from the get-go is better than staying with them for a little while, getting upset and leaving?
Do you want me to fill that one, Savannah?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Um, I think it depends on the dynamics. I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong way to do it. I think a question for reflection I would offer you is like knowing your particular family system, like what feels like the most loving thing you can do for yourself. I'm a little inclined to say book the place because you can always stay at the family house or whatnot and have that as a backup. Like it gives you a little more flexibility, maybe than trying to book something last minute. But I'm a big fan of people having that option. If that's logistically and financially doable for them, then I think it gives you a nice safe space. But what other questions do you have about that, Hans?
That answers them. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, you're so welcome. I'm so glad. Get a 5-star hotel, bouge it up. Like,
Take a bubble bath, go to the spa.
take a bubble bath, get in that robe. Who else can we support on this call? And again, there's no, like, any questions are welcome. We're here for you guys. People are probably thinking about all their relatives right now in this moment, right?
Nothing.
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, awesome. Well, so I'll talk a little bit more about creating structure and making it fun. If there's a way that you can gamify things in advance as well, right? Gamify everybody getting places on time. Gamify, create a reward structure. Really, I mean, if your family acts like a bunch of children, treat them like a bunch of children, but in the good way, like love your kids. So like if you can create those expectations, allow everybody to participate in a way that feels fun and exciting and supportive, and where everybody's on the same page about like, hey, this is how we're going to love each other well this year. It's not all about you. We're all going to practice some selflessness, and we're all going to have a better time because of it. This is how we want to do that. Just really put on your coach hat and call those game plays, right? Kevin.
Dun, dun, dun. There we go. All right. Unmuted. Hey, longtime listener, first time caller. So I'm sure we have all had the situation of, the direct conflicts that y'all talked about a bit here and how to manage that. That's all great. What about when you find yourself in the situations and it's not just the one person, it might be the couple, it might be the couple dynamic, it might be a parenting dynamic, it might be something going on that's going to be outside of your boundaries and outside of your ability to control, that is just going to light up the room, or at the very least make 95% of the room deeply uncomfortable, and you're waiting for that bomb to go and just watching it from distance. What's the best approach here?
A question I think of right away is, how would you want to feel in that scenario? And I'm gonna coach here a little bit, so roll with me here. Versus how you felt in the past. Like, what would make you feel successful in that situation?
By God, the situation not happening at all.
Right, but that depends on other people.
Yes.
Right, which is so frustrating. I know.
I think the sticking points come in trying to walk the tightrope between, do I interject at a place that might not be my place to interject? Or do we just let again, whether it's a couple fight, a parent-kid fights between kids, how things go, do we just let it play out and say, okay, I just gotta let this fly?
Right.
Having a more definitive vision of what what a correct process is, rather the ambiguity of like, a situation happened and I just don't know what to do.
Yeah, totally. Well, there's a few things that come to mind for me here, and I also want to hear Savannah's thoughts too. I think she's got a lot of great ones on this question, but like I immediately think, and there's a lot of variables here, right? But I immediately think of like you mentioned, like a couple fighting, right? Like really getting into it. That's uncomfortable for everybody, whether it's parents or different, I don't know, a couple in the family. There are, like, I go first to safety, and I don't just mean like physical safety, but if there's children in the room or, things like that, like I do think there's a time and a place to interject as adults and say, hey, it seems like you guys are having a really stressful moment. It's making all of us quite uncomfortable. Could we ask you to take that to another room? Like, that's an okay request to make, right? If it's a kind of thing where it's more, no one's in like deep emotional unsafety, but you're wanting to have a different experience, I think then it comes back a little bit to that choose your battles discernment piece, right? So you'll hear me say this a lot, but I'm going to come back to like, what is the most loving thing that you can do for yourself in that moment? And by proxy, the most loving thing for everyone else in the room. So there's a nuance here, but for a lot of us, it depends on our history. So I'm going to give some examples. If I have a history of not speaking up when I'm really deeply uncomfortable, my healing looks like probably saying something, right?
Mhm.
That is a shift in behavior for me. If my history is I always jump in and try to rescue everyone in the family and take care of their feelings, my healing might look like actually doing nothing and like going to the bathroom, right? Or removing myself from the situation. So this is where it's less about there being a correct way to handle it and more about being thoughtful around your particular emotional journey with yourself and with your family and what would look like healing and progress to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Savannah, you want to riff on this one a minute?
Yeah. I have three thoughts that come to mind. One is witnessing abuse or past trauma. One is hand grenades. I just got to say them so I can get them out and come back to them. And the last one is when somebody is just intent on aggression. So one of the things that I think when other people are having spats, right? Especially if you are, and I'm not saying this about you, but just if there are people who have grown up witnessing domestic violence or other abuse or other like very chaotic and unpredictable caregivers, et cetera, or just a lot of volatility, that stuff can be triggering at a deeper level. Even if the people who are arguing in the living room about like, oh my gosh, no, it's not your gift. This one's mine. I stole it for Dirty Santa, whatever. Even if that is really benign, being aware of what comes up and why and how, and your own potentially PTSD responses, and then being able to take those and regulate away, right? Is one thing. And maybe even finding an ally who is there with you, of being like, hey, I'm feeling,
Yeah.
and
Cousin, sibling, someone in the
yeah,
family.
yeah, cousin, sibling, yeah, whatever. Somebody who just gets you, and you can just check in and be like, here we go, right? But instead of bracing yourself for the here we go and let's get into the thing again, going right back to Jen's comment of like, how do you actually do the opposite, right? How do you flip the script? How do you either attune more to what they're doing, or attune less, right? And attune to yourself. So that's one thing. Other things, just sometimes there are people who just want to throw a hand grenade because they're bored and they like to see what happens, or because they only know how to connect over conflict. And so that they're going to bring up the thing, and they're going to try to push buttons. They're going to get under somebody's skin, and that is a situation where you have to look at, one, the intention of their heart, and then two, what they're trying to accomplish for other people. What are they trying to accomplish for themselves, right? Are they trying to feel self-righteous about something? Are they trying to, one up? Are they like, what exactly is the rationale behind throwing this hand grenade into the room, right? And then what are they trying to accomplish for other people, right? Sometimes there is implicit strategy behind, I'm going to pick this fight with so and so because if I start it, then dad won't start it, for example. And it's a diffusing mechanism. So if you can actually start looking, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just, I'm going to beat everybody to the punchline because I know everybody's going to be mad at me by the end of Christmas. So why don't I just go ahead and light everything on fire and get it over with?
Pipe bomb now. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so how I handle that usually is when somebody comes in and throws a hand grenade, I will call it out and be like, hey, looks like you're ready to pick a fight. Are you trying to pick a fight right now? And if they're like, no, I'm not trying to pick a fight. Okay. Well, if that's the case, then you need to express yourself differently, because right now this isn't working. So would you please try again? Because I'd love to hear what you're trying to say. What I hear is a lot of accusation and aggression. So would you mind please changing your tone and maybe the way that you're trying to say it? That takes a lot of centeredness and groundedness in you to be able to come at that non-reactively, non-combatively, and to de-escalate. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there are just going to be people who do want to pick a fight though, and they are just intent and hell-bent on connecting over conflict, right? Or they've got to be the winner, or they've got to, whatever, roid rage. In those situations, excuse yourself.
Yeah, get out.
Just get out. Just get out. There's no good that comes of it. And just say, I'll be here and ready to listen when you're ready to communicate it differently, but this isn't going to be how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Or I'm a, you know, and you can do that silently or overtly, depending on the dynamic. You can just remove yourself, or there may be a statement of like, I'm not feeling comfortable in the situation. I'll see you all over breakfast, or I'll be over here lunch tomorrow. Have a great night. And then peace, right? Kevin, is that helpful? Did we address your question adequately?
Yeah, absolutely. No, a lot of good strategies in there. There's obviously situational as things cruise along, but that gives me a lot to think about, and I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for such a great question. We appreciate it.
All right.
We're almost there.
Well, I think we're coming up on time. So thank you everybody so much for joining us. And thank you, Jen, so much for joining me. This has been awesome. We have a number of other webinars coming up. On Monday, the 18th, we'll be doing Don't Make Me Hate You. No, seriously, we really have to talk about what happens after you die. And this is a crash course for millennials and Gen X and basically anybody who's got an older parent and they're trying to figure out, hey, how do we actually talk about this stuff? I don't know what the game plan is. I'd love to know. I think you have an estate plan, but like, you know, if you do, you haven't shared it with me. So, you know, being able to kind of navigate some of those hurdles. We've also got other webinars coming up of estrangement repair, what you can realistically expect over the holidays and just in general in the repair process. Should you sell your business or pass it on to family, all kinds of other family related things that you might want to look into. So thank you all so much for being with us. We really hope that you will reach out and connect with us and ask any questions. Again, I am Savannah and this is Jen, and we're going to pop up our QR codes here. So please feel free to find us on LinkedIn.
So appreciate you all, sending you so much love for your holiday journeys, and don't hesitate to reach out if we can help.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.